The black van had circled the elementary school pickup line 3 times before Ethan Vance noticed it. And by the third pass he had already memorized its plate, its dented rear bumper, and the fact that the man in the passenger seat was watching not the building, not the crossing guard, but his daughter. If you're watching this, you already know the shape of what's coming. A gang, a little girl, a parking lot full of oblivious parents on their phones, and one father who used to do this exact job for a living. Stay to the end, because the way this story ends is not the way you think it ends. And if stories about fathers who turn out to be far more dangerous than anyone expects are the kind you need this week, hit like and subscribe because we post one of these every single day. Ethan Vance was 36, and for the last 4 years he had made a quiet, deliberate project of looking like nobody in particular. He drove a 10-year-old Subaru with a cracked side mirror he never got around to fixing. He wore the same navy quarter zip to every school pickup, rain or shine, because it was warm and because nobody looks twice at a dad in a quarter zip. What almost nobody in his current life knew was that before he became a father, Ethan had spent 9 years on the city's SWAT entry team, the last 3 of them as a hostage negotiator brought in specifically because he had a gift most tactical guys didn't, the ability to stand perfectly still in the middle of chaos and think 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. He had left the department the year his daughter Maya was born, not because the job had broken him, but because his wife, Dana, had been killed by a drunk driver 8 months into Maya's life. And Ethan had looked at his 6-month-old daughter and understood with total clarity that he could not keep a job where a stray bullet might make her an orphan twice over. So he became a claims investigator for an insurance company, a job with regular hours and 0 danger, and he became, above almost everything else he had ever been, Maya's father. Maya was 8 now, sharp as a tack, obsessed with a video game about building volcanoes and fiercely, hilariously protective of her dad in the particular way only children of single parents seem to be. She policed his diet, reminded him to floss, and had once told her teacher that her father was basically a superhero but boring about it, a description Ethan privately loved more than any commendation he'd ever received on the job. Every day at 3:15, Ethan left work early, parked in the same spot in the pickup line at Ferris Elementary, and waited for the moment Maya burst through the doors with her backpack half unzipped and her friend group scattering behind her. It was the best 15 minutes of his day, every single day, and he had never once imagined it as a place where anything could go wrong. There was a particular Sunday, back in the spring, that Ethan often thought of afterward as the last purely ordinary weekend before everything changed. He and Maya had spent the whole afternoon at the kitchen table building a papier-mâché volcano for her science project, flour paste up to both their elbows, Maya narrating an increasingly elaborate backstory for the volcano involving a dragon who lived inside it and only erupted when someone was rude to him. Ethan had laughed harder than he had in months, and when the volcano finally dried lopsided and slightly dragon-shaped despite neither of them intending it that way, Maya declared it perfect and insisted on naming it Gerald. It was a small, unremarkable afternoon, the kind that fills up most of a childhood without anyone marking it as significant. And Ethan would later realize it was exactly the kind of afternoon he had rebuilt his entire life around protecting. Not the big dramatic moments, but the 1,000 small ordinary ones that only exist when nothing goes wrong. The van first appeared on a Wednesday in late September, and Ethan clocked it the way he clocked everything now, not with suspicion exactly, more with the low-grade professional habit of an ex-cop who had simply never fully turned the observation off. It circled the block once, slow, and parked half a block down from the school with a clear sight line to the pickup line. 2 men sat inside, neither of them getting out, neither of them looking like parents. Ethan noted the plate out of habit and let it go. On Thursday, the van was back in the exact same spot, and this time it circled the pickup line itself before parking, close enough that Ethan could see the passenger's eyes move across the line of children, the way a man scans a crowd for one specific face. On Friday, it happened a 3rd time, and this time, as the dismissal bell rang and the doors burst open, the van eased slowly forward along the curb, matching Maya's pace as she walked toward her father's car, and Ethan felt something in his chest drop into a register he had not felt in 4 years. He did not grab Maya and run for the car in a panic, because panic was the one reaction his training had spent 9 years beating out of him. Instead, he walked toward her at a measured pace, positioned his body between her and the street, took her hand and got her into the Subaru with the calm, unremarkable efficiency of a father who did this every day, while his eyes never left the van's plate, its two occupants and the exact 3 seconds it idled alongside the curb before pulling away. That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat at his kitchen table and did something he had not done in 4 years. He opened the box in his closet that held his old department contacts, and he called a man named Detective Carlos Munoz, his former negotiation partner, now working gang intelligence for the city. Munoz did not laugh him off. He asked for the plate immediately, and within an hour he called back with a tone Ethan recognized from 100 old briefings. The flat, careful voice of a cop who has just found something he does not like. The van was registered to a shell address linked to a crew the department had been tracking for months. A loosely organized group running a child trafficking and extortion operation that targeted the school-aged children of parents with money, insurance payouts, or business assets worth leveraging. Parents, Munoz explained carefully. Exactly like the recent life insurance settlement Ethan had received after Dana's death. A settlement that, if you knew where to look, was a matter of public probate record. They're not guessing, Ethan, Munoz said. Somebody ran your name. You're not random. You're a target. The words landed like a physical blow, because Ethan had spent 4 years building a life so quiet, so ordinary, so deliberately unremarkable, precisely so that nothing could ever find its way back to his daughter. And here it was anyway, arriving through a door he had never even known was unlocked. Ethan did not sleep much that weekend. He spent it instead doing what he used to do before every high-risk call-out. He built a plan, and he built it around one unbreakable principle, the same one that had guided every hostage negotiation he'd ever run. Control the environment before the environment controls you. He could not simply pull Maya from school and disappear. A scared sudden move would only tell the crew he had made them, and desperate men who feel exposed sometimes accelerate rather than retreat. Instead, working with Munoz, he did the opposite. He kept his routine exactly the same every day, down to the minute, while quietly building a net around it that the men in the van could not see. Munoz arranged an unmarked unit 2 blocks from the school. The school's resource officer, briefed under strict confidence, adjusted foot patrol timing without ever changing the visible routine. And Ethan, drawing on skills that had never actually left him, began carrying a small covert radio clipped inside his jacket collar, the same brand and rig he'd used on 100 operations, tuned to a channel only Munoz's unit could hear. He also, carefully, without frightening her, taught Maya something he framed as a game rather than a warning. There was one moment in that same week, 2 days before the attempt, when Ethan very nearly aborted the entire plan out of pure fear for his daughter. Munoz called on a Tuesday night to say the crew's van had been spotted parked outside a different elementary school across town for nearly an hour, and for a long, cold minute. Ethan sat with his phone in his hand, seriously considering pulling Maya out of school entirely and driving them both somewhere the crew had never heard of. It was Munoz, of all people, who talked him back down, reminding him of a lesson from their old negotiation days, that the safest move is rarely the most dramatic one, and that yanking Maya out abruptly, with no net in place, no unit stage, no plan beyond raw fear, was exactly the kind of unplanned overcorrection that got people hurt in the field. You built this net for a reason, Munoz told him. Trust it, or we tear it down together on purpose, not out of panic. Ethan chose to trust it, and spent that night sitting outside Maya's bedroom door until nearly 2 a.m, listening to her breathe, before finally believing his own decision. He called it the fire drill for strangers. If a grown-up she didn't know ever tried to get her to come somewhere with him, even if the grown-up said her dad sent them, even if the grown-up used her name, she was to scream the word fire as loud as she possibly could and run straight back toward the school doors. Never toward a car. Maya, treating it exactly like the game he'd framed it as, made him practice it with her twice, shrieking fire across the living room and sprinting toward the hallway with such delighted enthusiasm that Ethan had to excuse himself to the kitchen for a moment. Because watching his daughter cheerfully rehearse her own escape plan was the closest he had come to breaking in 4 years. The attempt came on the following Thursday, 9 days after the van first appeared, and it did not come the way Ethan had wargamed it. It came from the side he hadn't fully covered, not the pickup line, but the side gate near the playground, the one parents used as a shortcut when the main line backed up, the one Ethan himself had used twice that same week, because a construction crew had narrowed the main lot. A woman he did not recognize, dressed in a delivery service vest with a plausible-looking badge clipped to it, approached the side gate at 3:10, 5 minutes before dismissal, and told the aide stationed there that she was picking up Maya Vance on behalf of her father, who had, she said, been in a minor car accident, and asked her to collect his daughter so he could meet them at the hospital. It was a good story. It was told calmly, with a clipboard, with a name spelled correctly, with just enough procedural confidence to nearly work on an aide managing 40 children at once. What the woman did not know was that Ethan, walking up the side path at that exact moment because he had decided that morning to cover the gate himself instead of the main line, was 30 feet away and closing, and that the radio clipped inside his collar had already caught Munoz's unmarked unit, reporting the black van easing into position on the side street behind the playground fence. Ethan did not run. Running would have told the woman and whoever was watching from the van that he had seen the whole thing unfold before it finished unfolding. And a startled crew is a crew that panics into worse decisions. Instead, he walked fast but unremarkable, closing the distance while speaking low into his collar, and he reached the gate 4 seconds before the aide finished writing Maya's name on the sign-out sheet. "I'm her father," Ethan said, stepping into the frame with a calm that did not match the speed at which his heart was moving. "I don't think we've met." The woman's composure did not crack immediately. She had clearly done this before, but something in her eyes recalculated fast. The particular flicker of a person whose script has just run out of road. "Oh, there must be some confusion, I was told," she started, and Ethan, drawing on 9 years of a very specific skill set, simply talked over her gently, the way he used to talk over a man on a ledge, filling the space so she never got the chance to finish building a new lie. "Let's call whoever gave you my daughter's name right now together and clear this up," he said, already reaching for his own phone, already knowing there was no such call to make, already watching her weight shift toward the gate the way a person's weight shifts right before they run. She ran. She made it 11 steps before 2 of Munoz's plainclothes officers, who had been closing from the far side of the playground fence for the last 90 seconds, put her on the ground with practiced efficiency, and the black van, which had eased forward along the side street the moment its passenger clocked the officers moving, was blocked in less than a block later by a patrol unit that had been staged, at Ethan's specific request exactly for that purpose. 2 more men were taken into custody inside it. Maya, watching from the aide's side at the gate, did not scream, did not cry, did not run toward a car. She did exactly what she had practiced twice, laughing, in their living room a week earlier. She turned and sprinted straight back toward the school doors, shouting the word they'd rehearsed, and it was, Munoz told Ethan later with something between admiration and disbelief, the calmest 8-year-old crime scene he had witnessed in 20 years on the job. What came out over the following 2 weeks was worse, and better than Ethan had let himself imagine. Worse because the crew turned out to be responsible for at least 3 prior attempts across the county, one of them successful, a case Munoz's unit had been quietly working for months without a single solid lead, until Ethan's documentation and the plate he'd clocked on that first Wednesday gave them the thread that finally unraveled the whole operation. Better, because the woman at the gate, facing the weight of a multi-county trafficking investigation, began talking within 48 hours, and her information led directly to the recovery of the child from that one prior successful case. A 9-year-old boy who had been missing for 6 weeks and who Munoz personally called Ethan to tell him about, his voice rough in a way Ethan had rarely heard from him in 9 years of working together. "You didn't just save your kid," Munoz said. "You closed a case that's been eating this department alive since March." News of what had happened moved through the small school community fast, the way it always does in a place where every parent recognizes every other parent from the pickup line. And for the first time in 4 years, Ethan found himself the subject of quiet, startled respect from people who had spent years assuming he was simply the friendly, slightly disheveled dad in the Navy quarter zip. The school's principal called him personally to thank him, her voice still shaking slightly 2 days later. A father Ethan barely knew, whose own daughter was in Maya's class, stopped him at pickup one afternoon and admitted almost sheepishly that he'd always assumed Ethan worked in insurance because he didn't have that look, and Ethan had smiled and said that was rather the point. Other parents, once word spread that the crew had been targeting families based on visible financial signals, began quietly asking him what to watch for, and Ethan found himself doing something he hadn't expected, standing in the same pickup line where it had all started, calmly walking anxious parents through the same small habits that had saved his own daughter. Notice what repeats. Trust the feeling before you can name it. Build a plan before you ever need one. It was not a lecture. It was closer to the kind of steady, patient briefing he used to give rookie negotiators, and it turned out the instinct to teach had never really left him either. Ethan told Maya the truth in careful, age-appropriate pieces over the following days, framing it the way you frame anything enormous for an 8-year-old. Some bad people had tried to trick her, and her fire drill game had worked exactly like it was supposed to, and Daddy and the police had made sure they could never try it again. Maya considered this with tremendous seriousness, then asked, with the particular bluntness only children manage, whether this meant her fire drill game was actually real the whole time. And Ethan told her yes, it always had been, and that she had done everything exactly right. She seemed on the whole less shaken than proud, a fact that both relieved Ethan and quietly devastated him, because it meant she trusted him completely to have already handled it, and he understood, sitting with her that night, that the entire architecture of the last 4 years, every quiet, unremarkable day, every navy quarter zip and cracked side mirror, had been built for precisely this, to make sure that trust was never once misplaced. The school implemented a new sign-out verification protocol within the week, one Ethan helped design alongside the resource officer, closing the exact gap that had nearly cost him everything. Munoz's unit made 6 additional arrests over the following month as the case widened, and the department, in a move that surprised Ethan more than almost anything else that had happened, asked whether he'd consider coming back in a consulting capacity, not on the entry team, nothing that would take him away from Maya, but as a part-time advisor, helping other families in similar situations understand exactly the kind of quiet vigilance that had saved his daughter's life. Ethan said he would think about it and found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he actually meant it. For 4 years he had believed that protecting Maya meant disappearing as completely as possible into an unremarkable life. He was beginning to understand it might also mean making sure other fathers knew what to look for before the black van ever slowed down outside their own school. On the Friday 2 weeks after the arrest, Ethan picked Maya up at the same side gate, at the same time in the same navy quarter zip, and walked her to the same cracked mirror Subaru. And for the first time in 9 days he let himself feel, rather than simply manage, exactly how close it had all come. Maya chattered the whole ride home about her volcano project, entirely unbothered, and Ethan found himself laughing at the right moments and meaning it, watching his daughter in the rear-view mirror with the specific, unguarded relief of a man who had spent 4 years building a quiet life out of the wreckage of a much louder one, and who had just discovered, in the worst possible way, that the quiet had never actually made him any less capable of defending it. There is a particular kind of strength that never announces itself, that shows up in a navy quarter zip and a cracked side mirror and 15 ordinary minutes in a school pickup line, and only reveals its full shape when someone foolish enough decides that ordinary means unguarded. A gang picked Maya Vance because her father looked, on paper and on the sidewalk, like exactly the kind of soft target their whole operation was built around. They had no way of knowing that the quiet man in the quarter zip had once talked armed men off ledges for a living, that he had already clocked their van on its very first pass, and that every single ordinary day since then had secretly been a rehearsal for the one day it mattered most. If this story reminded you that the calmest people you know may be carrying the most, tell us in the comments what it made you feel. Share it with a parent who needs the reminder tonight, and subscribe for the next one. Because somewhere out there, right now, another quiet father is already watching, already ready, already waiting.